Welcome back to At Home in Bethel Park. This is Judy Ann Scheidler, and today we have with us Mr. James Yusko from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Mr. Yusko is going to have a discussion with us about the health hazards of radon. As you probably know, or as I hope you know by now, radon is a major health concern in our areas. It's an odorless, tasteless, scentless gas that can occur just from coming up through the Earth's crust. And it's highly recommended that we test our homes for it. And today we're going to find out a little bit more about it and why we should be testing for it. Jim, thank you for coming.
Quite welcome.
How long have you been with DEP?
I've been with the DEP for over 31 years. And prior to that, another 7 or so years for 38 or more years in the field of radiation protection.
What type of radiation other than radon?
Other than radon, you have the medical x-rays, your dentist, your chiropractor, your physician, your veterinarian, your podiatrist, all the hospitals, as well as other laboratories and industries that use radioactive materials.
Okay, and that's all regulated through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protections as well?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and specifically today, though, you're with the Department of Environmental Protection for radon.
Correct.
What is radon?
Radon is a colorless, odorless, tasteless radioactive gas that is present because the Earth has produced it. Late astronomer Carl Sagan once made the observation that we are made of star stuff, which happens from when stars that have been previously in existence in the universe exploded. And in their explosions, they created the very heavy elements, such as uranium and thorium, from which we get radon.
Thorium, I've heard about uranium.
Okay.
Thorium?
Thorium is another element, another radioactive element in the periodic table. Mm-hmm. And that element, too, is radioactive, and it gives off a different, gives off some similar radiations, but it has a different decay chain in how a species or an element changes from one to another. The uranium breaks down and gives way to radium. When radium decays, it gives off radon. And radon gas has a relatively long half-life. And because of it, it can migrate, and that's why it can get into people's homes. Some of the other types of radon are very short-lived, so they cannot migrate far. But the one that is produced from radium can travel a good distance.
So the one that we test for is a very specific one when we talk about testing a home, not
Correct.
Necessarily a workplace or any other environmental condition. But when we're talking specifically about a home, there's a we test for
222.
222. Yes. Now, and radon 222, you said this one is the byproduct of the uranium going down to the radium. Down to the radon 222.
And then radon decays into other things, and as it decays to other radioactive elements, one of the daughter products of radon is extremely short-lived and can, if you're breathing it when it decays, it'll deposit in your lungs, and that's why it's dangerous. It decays, it gives off an alpha particle, and that can be taken up, or it could damage the tissues of your cell, of your lung, and prolonged exposures to this could cause lung cancer. It breaks the DNA in the lung cells.
How long does that particular particle have a life for in a home?
Radon 222 has a half-life of almost 4 days. So, and that's one of the reasons why it can, as an example, it is produced in the soil gas around your home. It can come into the home and in there can decay. And that's one of the reasons why it's dangerous.
Okay. Now, when we have it in our home and we're testing for it, we're doing a certain type of testing that says 48 hours. The state
Right.
tells us when we're going to be having a home on the real estate market, either selling it or buying it. They have a recommendation of 48 hours. If the radon molecule has a life of 4 days, why do we have a 48-hour test?
To allow for the ingrowth of the radon into that. You want to make sure, it'd be nice if you can just take a big sample of air and count that entire sample. But the tests aren't quite that easy to do. You want to have the ingrowth of the daughter products to be able to assess what the damage could be, or what the harm could be.
Okay, so we get a test. We get these tests done, and people who are in the market to buy or sell a home can be, for the very first time, learning about radon. And I'm surprised as a real estate agent and as a licensed tester for radon, how frequently people say, "What is that? Are we having a problem getting the message out?"
Apparently there is. Radon came to our attention in a big way in the early 1980s. We had known that radon exists in Pennsylvania for quite a number of years before that. But in 1984, our offices were called by individuals from a nuclear power plant that was still under construction. They found an individual whose clothing was triggering their radiation monitors. What made this so unusual was the fact that they didn't have any nuclear fuel in the plant at all. It was discovered that he was bringing radon products to work with him from his home. And when they went out to test his home, they found extremely high levels that laboratories at that time could not generate. It was just that his home was built over a certain outcropping and produced enormously large elevated concentrations of radon in his home. And that was kind of scary, especially because he had 3 younger children at the time.
This gentleman, that he was bringing it into the plant, and that was what was setting off the detectors, and that is how we came to become involved, even as a country, with radon. It started here in Pennsylvania. We have just a lot of areas in Pennsylvania that are either in what's known as a red zone or an orange zone. First of all, let's talk about a red zone and then an orange zone. We only have one yellow zone. It's over by Delaware, so forget about it. We don't live there. Okay.
Those zones you're referring to, Judy, are from an EPA map where they listed the average concentrations by county. I have a copy of that map if you want to have it available for your viewers. The average concentration just tends to be a little bit higher in those areas where they were tested. But the recommendation we'll still make is always to get your home tested and and at least make a determination of what your levels are. And also, if you're planning on doing any major remodeling of your home, do especially if it involves the lower parts, the habitable areas of the home, get tests done before and afterwards too. They're not that expensive.
That brings up a question I want to ask you that somebody asked me the other day. But we talk about radon levels. Radon levels that are acceptable are 3.9 and under. The 4.0 and over level is what the EPA has determined is a health hazard. Now, recently the World Health Organization came out with a different number, and EPA isn't looking at that. I actually had somebody who knew a lot more about this than me, and he was just buying a home, and he had gone out and researched this, and he goes, "Oh, it should be 2.9. I'm like, I didn't get that memo. And the EPA is not changing their standards. They feel that they're right on target with this. Do people understand what a picocurie is, first of all, or how much a picocurie per liter is?
Probably not.
Okay.
And it's because we in the radiation protection business can measure such very tiny quantities and tiny concentrations of radioactive materials. You know, ionizing radiation is one of the easier things to measure as compared to some of the chemicals or other toxins that might be out in the environment. You know, it's relatively easy to measure radiation. So as an example, if you were to have $1 billion,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe a stack of pennies or something like that, the equivalent, and if you wanted to call that, say, a curie, a picocurie then would be one of those pennies compared to $1 billion.
1/1000th.
Yeah.
So a picocurie is 1/1000th of the collection.
Actually, it's 1/100000th.
1/1000000000th.
Which is a millionth of a millionth. Very, very small.
Very, very small. So people look at this, and a curie is actually a measurement developed from Madame Curie. I remember that from my classes. So the picocurie is 1/10000000th of a curie.
Yes.
Now, what is a curie?
A curie was set up to be, if you will, the amount of radiation given off by 1 gram of radium. That's
Okay.
the historic definition. And then they changed that slightly, where actually now a curie is 37 billion disintegrations per second.
Okay. I don't know if we can do this, but if I had an 8-ounce glass filled with nothing but air, and it had a radon measurement just in that glass of 4 picocuries per liter, how much would that be? Exactly how many do we? It would be a almost negligible amount. It would be hard for
Would be
somebody
only a
to
few atoms, correct.
only a few atoms, right? So whenever I explain to people what you just said, and not anywhere near as detailed as you do, I try to stumble through it. They say, that's such a small amount. How can that possibly make a difference?
Because it is ionizing radiation. You are dealing with a gas, the radon gas, which is odorless, colorless, tasteless, so you can't sense any of the radon gas being around. But if you breathe it in, there is a chance that some of the radon atoms that you're breathing in are going to decay, and if they decay inside your lungs, that energy that they're depositing can break some of the cells, can damage some of the cells, and if you damage enough of the cells in your lungs, you can cause lung cancer. You're depositing energy there.
You're depositing energy, and it's random. Whether or not you breathe it in, because the molecules are moving throughout the air
Correct.
in the basement. So even if it's a small amount, it doesn't matter if it's a small amount that you breathe in or a larger amount, depending on where you are. The very fact that you are ingesting any of it, or any of it beyond a certain percentage or possibility. I guess the 3.9 is more of a possibility.
Well, the EPA has, since the early 80s, recommended that the annual average concentration in a home be less than 4 picocuries per liter of air.
Right.
And that's recommended as the long-term average. There are some seasonal variations, there are day and night variations, there are variations due to weather conditions. There's all sorts of factors that can affect and contribute to a radon concentration at any given moment.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why going with a long-term test is a better one for determining what the average concentration is in a home.
And I do know that, and I agree with that. The problem is we do not have a lot of testers who do long-term testing. We are more geared towards a real estate market with our testing and 48-hour turnaround.
And everybody wants instant answers, too.
Instant answers. So can we talk about a couple individual situations that have come up and maybe people can relate to and understand? And first of all, I'm going to talk about my home, because I know my home pretty good. I calibrate. I've got about a dozen monitors. I do cross-checks and side-by-sides in my home. And my home started out with measurements about 1, and then they got up to 2, and then 3, and then the last year they've been 7, 8, Last month, whenever I was testing, they were in the 9 and 10 range. For years, my home was fine. Years. I always said to people, oh, my home doesn't have radon. Well, I'm getting a system put in. What caused that?
Many factors.
Okay.
As your house is settling, there may be some cracks occurring in your in the walls or in the basement floor. You may have been doing things to conserve power and energy, so you may have been putting other things in to make the house tighter, so you're not having your energy dollars going out the window or whatever if you're putting in new windows or doors or you're insulating more. Those combinations of things can affect that. A lot of people are on the bandwagon, rightly so, for energy efficiency, but in doing so, they're buttoning up their houses more.
Right.
And the houses are settling. As they are settling, you're getting cracks in the walls and floors. And I like to use the analogy that radon is the radioactive equivalent of a short circuit. It'll follow the path of least resistance. So if there is a crack in the floor, radon is going to come up that way rather than try to penetrate through the concrete.
And as it degrades inside the earth, it does the same thing. It's going to follow the path of least resistance.
Correct.
And if your house is in the way, it's going to come into your house.
Correct.
Are there conditions inside of the earth that change where radon's going to be coming out?
Inside the earth, not necessarily.
Close to the earth's surface?
Well, most of the radon will be coming from an area close to your house. It's not going to travel half a mile or something like that from the rock that far away. It's more likely going to be in the area within, say, 5 meters of your home.
Oh, okay. So the radon's going to be breaking down, and how much is coming into our house if we're in an area where there's radon is going to depend on our house conditions.
Correct.
As well as how it is escaping through the earth.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting thought. I had thought that it was a little bit more involved with maybe freeze lines changing and things like that.
That's part of it.
Oh, is it? Okay.
If you have a heavy freeze, that barrier where the earth is frozen or a heavy snow cover is going to represent the ceiling. So the radon gas will be coming up, hitting the ceiling, and then trying to move laterally once it hits that.
Oh, okay.
If you have lots of asphalt or concrete, again, you're coming up to a certain area, and then it's trying to move laterally until it decays.
You know, that's interesting because we just put a new concrete parking pad behind our home.
That could be a reason, too, for why your levels are going up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't even given that a thought. We have Altec has a client who was buying a house over in Upper St. Clair, and he had his house tested by us, and it came back high. And so the owners were, everybody's on board with put in a system. That's not the issue. So they put in the system, and the contractor said, here's a test it, and send it into the state, and everything's fine. And our buyer decided that he wanted us to go back and test. And when we went back and tested, the results were higher than the first time we tested. And then the contractor came back again, put in another pipe and another fan. And it was higher even still than the second time we tested. The third time they did their own testing and couldn't get it under. What's going on there? What's going on? I told them to get another contractor, quite frankly, is what I said. It's not a big house.
Understandably, and it would be very frustrating if you were that homeowner, too.
Very
to
expensive.
have things like that because you're spending the money, you're expecting the situation is fixed.
Yes.
And that's one of the recommendations that we've always made for contractors and for testers and the mitigators, that they should be guaranteeing their work.
There are situations.
Get it in writing.
Yeah, get it in writing. But I know there are situations because I've spoken with some contractors who talk about barriers underneath the footing, extra support walls that they're not able to draw through. And, you get an idea that, yes, there are some circumstances where they're not going to be able to just do one pipe, they might have to do two. But when you're talking about a 3-bedroom, colonial. 4 pipes, I think, is a little bit over the top. What should this owner contact your office?
You can contact our offices in Harrisburg.
In Harrisburg, yes.
800-23-RADON.
800-23-RADON. Okay. Is this what we do whenever we have any complaints and when we want to verify somebody is certified to do testing?
Yes, I believe our website also has the information about contractors. That is changing. It's updated periodically as we have different people who are testing for radon or who do mitigation for radon. Look at the website.
Look at the website.
Or contact the, that's probably the easiest information in contacting the local DEP offices, since Harrisburg is keeping things more up to date.
Okay. The radon contractors who do testing and radon contractors who do mitigation are all required to be licensed through the state of Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection. There's some pretty rigorous standards to get that license. There's ongoing education, there's the initial courses, there's review. I just had a wonderful man, Delvey, come out to my office, do my review in January. Do you feel that it is comprehensive enough that they're being trained the way they need to get the information out to the public? Or should we be working more on training, more on certifying, more on seeing who's delivering services?
What you've said is good information, but perhaps an easier way would be to try to prevent the radon before it gets inside the home. If you will, there are a number of techniques that could be used for radon-resistant new construction.
Oh, yes.
And with radon-resistant new construction, you are employing techniques and you're doing things to prevent the problem from occurring. The old adage that an ounce of prevention might be worth a pound of cure would certainly be applicable here.
Yes, I agree.
During the construction of a new home, you could put in, as an example, the gravel bed. You can put in the plastic liner. You could seal the gaps between the floor and the concrete. You can install the piping. You can install the junction box and the vent to the outside. And if the house is then tested and you find that the concentrations are higher, then you can hire the contractor and they could put in the fan. So you're converting a passive system to an active system.
Do we have any building requirements that require that yet? Because I agree with you. I really think, I make money doing this, but at the end of the day, I really think that it's something that could be controlled without testing. I agree with that 100%. Do we have any building codes that call for that yet? Are we working on that?
There are some. Some of the 50 states, 25 don't have requirements.
Does Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania has requirements, but they're not statewide. They are by locality.
Okay.
And there are, I checked the website this morning, there are a couple localities in the greater Pittsburgh area that require radon-resistant new construction.
That's nice to know, and that's good to know. The installation of a system, by the way, is not really cost prohibitive. In the early 90s, when we first started doing all this testing for them, it was like $2,000, $3,000. It was very expensive.
No competition.
No competition. Now we're talking in a 3-bedroom house. I know a company that's very reputable that puts it in for about $750. That's a weekend away with your honey. It's for a lifetime of security. Running that system with that inline fan is only about $60 a year. We're not talking about something that's out of most people's budgets. Why aren't we getting more people putting them in? Maybe
some people just prefer not to know that they have a problem.
Not to know that they have a problem. There's a sad fact. There was a gentleman that I tested his home for. He was an older gentleman. And I went in and I put the radon monitor in his home, and he related to me that his wife had just died from lung cancer and she had never smoked. And this was down in Washington County. And I said, I'm very sorry to hear that. Was she down here much? And this was her sewing room, this was her craft room, and he showed me. The radon levels on that house were somewhere in the 50s. And she'd never smoked, and they were so surprised. And of course, there was no point in my ever saying anything to this gentleman about anything, and I didn't. But the reality is, that's not uncommon.
Correct.
Do we have other kinds of cancers and health effects from radon, or are they still exploring those avenues?
The primary one happens to be lung cancer. But if you are using well water and are using that for all of your drinking water, assuming that none of the chemicals, everything passes in terms of the chemical realm, having the well water be the water supply throughout your home could be bringing in some radon gas as well. And if you're using the showers, you're distributing more radon throughout the house. Again, if your system is based on well water. Surface water, you don't have that problem.
Because it's gone. Does ingesting water that contains radon create any?
Well, if you have the radon in the water, again, you're talking about energy being deposited, and in this case, it's being deposited in the stomach and the intestines. So there is a relationship then between elevated radon in well water drinking samples and with possible stomach or colon cancer.
That's just, that's sad. That's sad. These people actually did have a well on their property too. They were out in Washington County. We heard a little bit a couple years ago about granite countertops. Do we really have a concern with granite countertops bringing in radon into the home, or was that just a bit of a scare?
Granite contains naturally occurring radioactive materials.
Okay.
Mother Earth put it there.
Yes.
We are choosing then to use granite and similar materials in our building construction.
Yes.
However, granite is an extremely durable substance. Can be a very beautiful substance, and you can measure radiation levels from it. Mm-hmm. Are they significant? Well, they're measurable, but they're not necessarily dangerous. Okay. There are some buildings where an awful lot of granite is being used, and if you walk in there with a Geiger counter, you will see very elevated readings, but it's naturally occurring.
Wow. Oh my, okay. Well, I think I missed my cue a couple minutes ago to say we were almost out of time. This has been, there's so much to say about radon. I want to ask you please to give everyone the phone number for DEP and the 800 number for information. In fact, we'll provide it on the screen after this program's over.
Right.
And I would like to thank everybody for joining us today at home in Bethel Park. I just wish we did have more time because there's a lot more information I would like to bring you about this. So watch the website at home in Bethel Park and go to the DEP website, and we will try and get you more links and more information. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you next time.
Another adventure with Savings Man.
And with 0% down, all you have to pay on this mortgage is the interest.
Now that's affordable.
Are you sure?
Savings Man.
Watch out, you two. This is not your typical mortgage guy. He's really a subprime mate. Out you go. Monkeying around with the wrong mortgage can destroy your dreams.
You're right, Savings Man.
Remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. For more tips and tools, visit choosetosave.org today.